All right. Hello, world. Okay. Tonight's featured reader is Eleanor Berry. Eleanor has served as president of the Oregon Poetry Association and the National Federation of State Poetry Societies. The poems of her latest collection, Not Just Us, which came out earlier this year from Finishing Line Press, reflect on her encounters and relationships with non-human fellow animals. Her Works of Wildfire won the 2022 Grayson Books Chapbook Award. Previous publications include Only So Far from the Main Street Rag, No Constant Hues from Turnstone Books, and Green November from Traprock Books. Here is Eleanor Berry.
Thank you so much for adjusting the mic perfectly, and for giving me a little precedent for having trouble reading my own writing. It's completely overwhelming to see you here tonight. I was under the impression that Mark would be here, and Richard, who has been caring for me for nearly a full year now, through quite an adventure, even a bigger adventure than parking and going across the grass to get here tonight. So it's wonderful to be here with you. I'm actually going to read from two collections tonight. One of them, this little chapbook that Mark mentioned, and another, a full-length collection from a debut collection from a Mumbai poet. So we're going to have quite an adventure. It will be a bit of a sandwich. We'll start with a few pieces from toward the beginning of Not Just Us, then I'll give you a sampling of this wonderful collection, and then we'll return toward the latter part of my chapbook. Now, I know you thought you were coming to hear a poetry reading tonight, and, well, yes, but another way of looking at it is that you're coming to hear a reading from a couple of bestiaries. And, perhaps bear that in mind to be prepared. I'm going to begin this with its very first poem, which is a sort of ekphrastic poem. I will mention a particular word in it because it was a new word to me when I came upon it and decided to employ it. It's the word fossorial. Anyone? No one's nodding. Well, it turns out to mean digging, living underground. That was part of why I liked it. I also liked it for its sound. I also liked it for its sort of evoking professorial. In haberdashery, after a statuette signed David Sharp, Rye Ing. This badger is dapper in aqua morning coat and vest over tan russet check trousers with matching russet on tan polka dot tie knotted at his throat. Statuette barely a foot high, he stands erect, braced by a broad tail. long, blunt-tipped snout, white belays from nose to crown, belies his finery. Cast-molded figurine bought years back for a gift to my father, reclaimed after his death. I picked it for him because I saw it as his image of himself. Fierce, fossorial hermit passing for a country gentleman, perfectly outfitted in the fashion of an earlier era. Now he peers sidelong from the mantelpiece, an animal in haberdashery. Like me, like you. It's curious how strange our fellow animals seem to us, and how strange we must seem to them. This one is a bit longer. It's called How They See Us. And it has a little epigraph from a Canadian poet named Earl Burney. Like a white snail in the supple, dark flowers. How curiously made we two humans must appear to the 4 alpacas who live in our pasture and barn. Each of us, such a poor, bare, forked animal, as Lear on the heath saw every man to be, once stripped of the trappings of rank. How curiously clad we must appear, not in coats that grow from the skin, covering all but the toes, insensibly thickening from week to week, blanket against cold, when wet, shingled to shed rain, but in sundry assorted pieces, different each day, offhandedly sloughed, later as casually resumed, leaving patches of skin bare, leaving the face naked, yet equally odd, keeping the 2 feet always shod. How frightening they must find our arms and hands that move ways their forelegs never will, now drawn in, now spread wide, spokes from the hubs of our trunks, fearsomely wheeling about, reaching and with curling fingers grasping like mouths. How strange the ways we arrange our limbs must look to these kin of camels when they see us lower our bodies not right down to the ground as they do, cushing, folding front legs under, tucking the back ones up behind, but just setting our rumps on platforms of sorts. They whose swan necks remain erect while they lie prone, who wrestle by twining those necks together like snakes. What do they make of our heads' short stalks? They who keep silent, except to hum in distress, shriek, warning or challenge. What do they make of our tireless talk, the multifarious sounds we pour out at them, at each other, at the air? When we smile, showing upper incisors, where they have a dental pad, do they think we're baring our teeth like coyotes to snap? We never join them chewing cud. How can they tell that we, too, ruminate after a fashion? How do they see us when we come among them? squatting amid cushed alpacas. How do we see ourselves? A mirror, if one were hanging on the barn wall, would show us as clumsy clowns in motley beside their furred and limber grace. A little bit about the vagaries of publication. Some of you may know about an earlier collection of later poems of mine that began with these alpacas when we were leaving them at the time of the 2020 Labor Day weekend Beachy Creek fire. These poems were written almost all in the 2010-2020 period. And they languished, I would say, as the final section of a full-length book manuscript, which kept getting rejected. And finally I thought, well, maybe no one who's reading this is seeing this group of poems as intrinsic to this bigger collection. Maybe I should try sending it by itself. That happened. And the circumstances of its publication were extraordinary because the whole process took place between the disabling stroke I had just about a year ago and this spring. There were these little intervals of clarity and function that occurred that enabled me to do all the things I was supposed to do by the dates, by the dates required. So it's an extraordinary process altogether. So these poems are of a place that it is no longer ours in any sense, and that is altogether changed. Amid freewheeling crows, you startle me, landing on a fence post right outside the living room window, your naked head strikingly human, but for its wattle red hue. Beside other birds, all fully feathered, your kind looks as odd as we do among other mammals, our bare skin next to their fur. You turkey, vulture, your double name, two words we call one another to mock, accuse. But you seem sympathetic now that I see you close. Amid freewheeling crows, you grip the fence post, size up the scene. You have the bony face and bald pate of a lean, old, beak-nosed man, and your restless gaze is wary, puzzled, troubled. It's a long time before you lift off, beating broad wings to bear aloft your heavy body. This is the last one in this early group that I'm going to read. Another bird, very different. Little narrative here. Sighting. a sudden thunk against a dining room window. Some headlong flyer the hawk silhouettes taped on the panes failed to frighten away. Stunned, the victim, about the size of a jay, dangles a moment by one yellow three-toed foot from a twig in the hydrangeas, winter bare beneath the windows. Then the curled toes lose their hold. The body drops, the rest of the way to the ground, lies upside down in the dirt, eyes closed, feathered chest heaving. But scarcely a minute later, the eyes blink open, swivel around. The disheveled bird rights itself, lifts off, wings over the backyard to the woodlot behind, lands near the top of a Douglas fir. It stays there a long time, perched on a high bough, slowly turning its head to look all around, though it doesn't seem to see my husband and me watching with binoculars through the window it just struck. Speckled breast, flat, round face, a compact bird of prey. We compare it to the plates in Peterson, Sibley, check field marks and range, find a perfect match. Northern pygmy owl. If it hadn't smashed into our window, we might never have encountered this small, strong-winged hunter, even though it's active in daylight. Aloft on a high branch, no more than a knob to the naked eye. Had we noticed it at all, we'd likely have thought it a lump of moss. How little we know what others inhabit this place we call ours. This handsome collection is a debut collection by a young Mumbai poet, which was selected as the winner of the 2024 Barbara Stevens Award given by the National Federation of State Poetry Societies. The judge for that competition was Diane Seuss, who was very excited to have discovered this poet. She was the first overseas winner in the then 31 years of this competition. I had the honor and delight of working with her as the editor of the collection, and we hired Sean Avenigo Sanders of the Poetry Box as the book designer. And it's a beauty of a book called They Gather Around Me, the Animals. I do have copies of it for sale, as well as this little one. And I will try to give you a sense of some of the things she does in here. One of those things is to imagine the absence of our fellow animals. This is a prose poem with no birds in it. Now that the birds are gone, we hang our cuckoo clocks upside down. Insects yawp and trill from windshields and kitchen sinks. The sun still comes out blaring like a red horn. but the pheasants are nil. On the mountains, in the eaves, under awnings, on ficuses, not one blasted wing. In the skies, a mass migration of dragonflies. In our hands, just the rattle of leftover casks and bills, like souvenirs from a past so long ago, but so near. No more cocks announcing the coming of light. No more frogmouths signaling the arrival of night. Styes grow on the eyes of trees. We break our binoculars in grief. And then there's the presence of animals and the presence of some marvelous words. This is a poet who is not the least bit afraid of technical words and completely immersed in words that are regional as well. Anaron, which I may be mispronouncing, Anaron, is a type of amphibian. Where did it go? Caecilians are kind of amphibian. Anaron means tailless. Caecilians means blind. In this case, it may be just small eyes, but they're snake-shaped. Got, which I'm probably mispronouncing, is a term in India for steps descending to bodies of water. And they're all wonderful in the poem. Amphibian, you can call me Anaron, moist with semi-permeable skin, peptides growing on me like bees. I was once tadpole, gilled, tailed, morphing from frog spawn to child straight into fresh streams. Here, see my hind limbs longer than my fore. My Triassic history is more ancient than ecosystems. We were here before you. I am sister to salamander. I am sister to newt. Caecilians are my brothers, fossorial, cylindrical, serpent-bodied mysteries. See my man carrying a diaphanous vocal sac, fluorescent, burgeoning. Hear his old croak song, long and pelvic. See one torrential sperm release after another. See all of these wet guts in the rain. Before the lust of your colonization came mine. So, a persona poem. And I'm going to read you two more of Kanjana Parashar's poems. And this one is on page 63 in my notes tell me. Elephant orifices. My beloved texts me, asks me, "What are you doing?" I play his soft voice in my head, each syllable drawing me in like a seeker to gnosis. But I'm looking at the long, ancient necks of roofed turtles. I'm wondering about the sound of two hard carapaces clashing like coconut shells. I'm thinking of beetles that light up their abdomens, sauntering gaily into the magnificence of elephant orifices. How their thick, sleepy trunks must inhale such bioluminescence while their gray bodies crush a field of green grass below. I want to reply, I love you. But there is just so much fauna. What if, while I'm texting him, a songai wanders onto some giant fundi? Or a jacana lays her eggs on an old lily pad? Who will notice then? The luciferin churning like small star jasmines in the moist cave of a pachyderm's nose. And here's a birthday poem by a poet a good many decades younger than this one. 26. In the 1990s, diclofenac was used to treat cattle diseases. Many vultures started dropping dead after feeding on the medicated carcasses. Gyps bengalensis, G. indicus, and G. tenuirostris. They took a hit so bad that later the Parsees planned to build vulture aviaries for the traditional departure of their dead. I was born in that decade, somewhere around the confirmed end of Javan tigers. Since my birth, there are others who have gone extinct. Birds, civets, rhinos, and yet countless onorons hide in the Western Ghats. Turn this shola, peatland, lateritic plateau, and you will find a species still willing to live, shy only of the blessed grace of taxonomy. When my mother asks how I want to celebrate my birthday this year, I say, quietly. Just so I don't lose track and get carried away. How are we doing on time, Mark? He actually gives me a number indication. He didn't do that for you. Okay. Well, maybe I'll skip a later. One of the major inspirations for me in writing of and to our non-human animal kin is the animal poetry of Marianne Moore, which I was reading avidly when I was about the age of Conchana Parashar, and I've never stopped. This is a poem that is specifically inspired by a particular poem of Marianne Moore's, and she was a maker of intricate forms, and it attempts to follow the form of that particular poem. Mine is called The Arctic Fox, after Marianne Moore, the Arctic ox or goat. Derived from The Wanderer by Gary Hamilton in the February-March 2012 issue of national wildlife. Marianne Moore was an avid reader of national wildlife, too. And she wrote poems with such derivations. About the Arctic fox, Miss Moore says simply that to wear its fur, one has to kill it, whereas she prefers to dress in fiber creatures yield without distress. Like Kiviat, the underwool the muskox sheds each spring. Fur aside, I think the Arctic fox, an animal whose curious traits Moore would have found as worthy of praise as those she eulogized in the pangolin, jerboa, and sundry other creatures. Surely she would have celebrated how, like plants that adapt to desert weather by hunkering low and retaining water in leaves reduced to tabs, thickened and densely fuzzed, the Arctic fox has fur on its footpads to preserve body heat while it hunts on polar ice swept by frigid gusts, and cocks stubbier ears, sniffs out prey with a shorter muzzle than its cousins whose range is temperate. When the local lemming population crashes, it survives this decimation of accessible prey, not by hibernating, but by roaming through the 3-month Arctic night, seeking what polar bears leave of their kill once those top predators have eaten their fill. Ice-tuned carcasses of walrus or whale, newborn seal pups in frozen layers, whatever food circumstance may provide. Even on sea ice, featureless and in constant motion, the Arctic fox can tell direction, trace complex routes that may extend 2, even 3,000 miles, but still loop back to a former den. This compact creature has adapted well to the harsh, unstable place it dwells. But even if we wear no fur, are we not still killing the Arctic fox? By consuming goods whose manufacture emits pollutants that insulate Earth, so shrink the polar ice cap and lure the larger red fox north? Facing competition and reduction of its range at once, may not the Arctic fox be pressed beyond its power, however remarkable, to respond? This is my penultimate, and the final one is very, very short. The penultimate is a persona poem, maybe an unlikely speaker. A coral polyp considers the nature of its identity. I am connected by a thin sheet of tissue to other polyps identical to me. I am one member of a dynamic collectivity of clones. Together, we form a bulwark, sheltering the edge of the land from the battering sea. Although as fixed in place as any rock formation or rooted plant, I am a predatory animal. I am a stomach, a mouth, and tentacles. Coiled within my skin are spring-loaded stingers that shoot poison darts into my prey. I host a crowd of minuscule creatures, some dwelling in my mucus coat, some inside my endodermal cells. All pay their rent in kind. The food they manufacture, they share with me. Defending themselves, they save me from disease. They are my farmers and my armies. I depend upon them. If their crops fail, if their troops fall to invading throngs, I die. So it is for all us polyp clowns. If our microbes cease to nourish and protect us, we succumb. This living reef, built of our bodies, begins to crumble away. What am I? Am I an I? If not an I, then what? I'm not myself alone. I'm nothing apart from my neighbors and my tenants. We, all of us together, compose a holobiont, a great chorus where none can sing solo. And you, smug reader, supposing yourself sole and entire, you are no such thing. You too live by what lives around and within you. See how short it is. Very last poem in the little chapbook too. Unpeopled. Between high ridge and flat lake, I'm going to start that again, even though it's this short. Between high ridge and flat lake, this width of tawny grass and brush, a place on this planet Earth. In such a place, you know the human world is not the world. You see how manifold the world would be without us.
Thank you, Eleanor. Wasn't that terrific? Okay, so you bought some books. They're on the back? They're over here? They're over here. Okay. There are bags in the books. There are books in the bags on the side. On the back table, there's some snacks. Eat the cookies. There's some wine back there. Yeah, drink that wine up. There's 2 sign-up sheets. One is for the open mic and one's for the mailing list. So sign up on the appropriate sign-up sheet back there. And there is a container back there to give money for the Salem Poetry Festival. We'll take a couple minutes and come back to the open mic. Oh, yeah.
There's plums.
Oh, and there's plums.